Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this Utility Week webinar in association with Genesis and Connect. I'm Denise Shevin, the Intelligence Editor of Utility Week, and I'm going to be chairing today's discussion. The focus of the event is on improving customer experience through personalisation and the role that technology can play in that. The pressure to improve customer experience is coming from all directions. In energy retail, there's intense competition. In water and networks, there's pressure from the regulators. And then, of course, there's pressure on everyone to meet the rising expectations for better service from customers themselves. And for a number of reasons, utilities don't do as well as other sectors in customer satisfaction surveys. So we all know there's room for improvement. But set against this, the last 12 months has seen huge acceleration of digitisation and holds out hopes for better customer interaction. Utilities embrace the cloud and switch to different ways of working at lightning speed during the first lockdown. And we've also seen a very notable switch to digital engagement. Energy and water firms have reported a take-up of self-serve and more customers wanting to engage through social networks like Facebook and WhatsApp. Keeping customers happy through umpteen channels and growing whilst dealing with the fallout of the pandemic, including more people in debt, certainly provides utilities with challenges. But it also presents a great opportunity to take forward and build on the momentum of the past year and gain a deeper understanding of new workflows and customer behaviours. It also affords the opportunity to explore how digital solutions can help respond to individual needs efficiently and with empathy, and in a way, of course, that makes it more affordable for utilities themselves. In other words, how can they deliver on the needs of individuals? Well, joining me for the discussion are some experts in customer experience. First up is Nicola Sawford. Nicola is the Managing Director of Customer Whisperers, a boutique consultancy which works with many big brands across the business spectrum to improve customer experience. We have Tim North, who's the head of contact center go-to-market at Connect. Tim has over 25 years experience of working in voice and contact center solutions to help clients enhance their customer interactions. And our third speaker is Richard McCroshan, the global digital AI sales lead for Genesis. Richard is responsible for helping brands capitalize on the new technology to deliver memorable customer experience. We'll be talking to all of our speakers for the next 25 minutes or so before opening up for your questions. So please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to send in your questions to us. I'd appreciate it if you could do that rather than through the general chat, as it's easier for me to spot them. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to stream later. So without further ado, I'd like to start the discussion by asking Nicola to say a bit more about her work, give us some brief views on the key trends shaping customer experience in utilities and whether this chimes with trends across other consumer businesses. So over to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Denise. Well, it's been a really interesting year. Interesting perhaps being an understatement. We've seen a lot of change happen over the last year. Not all of it is new. A lot of it was change that we were starting to see happen in different sectors at different paces. And what's happened over the last year is it's just really accelerated. And from our point of view, we've seen about 10 years worth of change in an 18-month period. So things that we would have liked to see happen faster are happening faster by necessity. And the most interesting stuff comes out of changes in customer behaviour. Some because they've had to change behaviour because all organisations have had to work in a different way, or they've had to behave in a different way, but also customers trying things now that they have a propensity to continue using. So we're seeing some really big channel shifts, customers using different channels for different things and being prepared to use particularly digital channels for more things than they were ever prepared to before. Also multi-way experiences, which is causing a lot of issue for client customer journeys, where a customer starts in one channel, flips to another, goes to another channel, comes back, and keeping track of where they are and what they're doing at what point is tricky. We're seeing a real increase in the propensity for customers to self-serve, and a lot of that will stick. There are a lot of customers who won't go back to doing things the way they used to do them. And some of them were the hardest customers to get to try these new methods of self-service in the first place. So that's been quite useful. We're seeing a much stronger focus across all sectors on vulnerable customers, and a recognition that vulnerability is truly dynamic. You know, we've seen customers through the pandemic who were never going to fall into a vulnerable category, all of a sudden fall into a vulnerable category, either through illness or through debt or through changes in their work or home situations. So, you know, it just goes to show that vulnerability is a flick of a switch. We are seeing organisations having to predict and anticipate what customers are going to do, and to tailor their approaches more and personalise those experiences. And I think from our perspective, we work across sectors, but we don't see anything particularly unique about what's going on for utilities. All of these behaviours are affecting all of the organisations in all of the sectors that we work with. I think the only different consideration in utilities is the way the regulators behave and what organisations can and can't do in response.
Okay, thank you. And do you think that some really interesting points there? It'd be useful to know, do you think utilities are doing good in terms of delivering a good customer experience, you know, compared with other sectors? How do they measure up?
Okay. Well, I always play it straight and honest, and I have a big soft spot for utilities. My background is utilities. That's where I started my career. But the truth is we're always a bit behind the curve for lots of reasons, and we have lots of excuses for being there. I think there's potentially a lot more we could do. There are some good things going on, no question, but it isn't always easy, and it certainly isn't fast. So I think one of the most difficult things for utilities at the moment is the speed at which they're able to change. And this insular view of looking to what utilities traditionally do. I think we've got to do a lot more looking at other organisations outside of the sector, pulling on the great stuff that's happened in some really quite unusual places and applying those back to utilities. So that cross-sector collaboration piece, I think, is more important now than ever.
Okay, well, that's a really good bit of advice there. Tim, perhaps you'd like to respond to Nikki's observations and, you know, suggest a few things that you've noticed as well.
Yeah, I was listening to Nikki, and there was a lot of really good content there, trying to digest it all. And I'm probably thinking from a utilities perspective, the people sat here listening and probably in two camps. Probably in one camp think, yeah, we're doing about that, but yeah, we could do about that. And then you got the others are thinking, how could we do anything like that? And then you talk about the different sectors and the difference in sectors. I think there's two themes, so it's two sides, two sectors. Nikki might say there's a third, but I'll just focus on two sides in all sectors. There's traditional and there's challenger. And I think it's either or have got their own challenges. So traditional have always communicated with their customers in a certain way. And while they're trying to change that, they want to change that, their customers are not used to that. So it's a challenge for them to change the way they interact with their customers. Whereas the challenger grows up with the customer and educates them from day one and say, this is how we do business. And you naturally flow through that. My example would be electricity company. My supplier, I did call them once, but I won't do it again, you know, because I didn't need to, because the app did it all for me. Whereas an electricity supplier that I was trying to move to said when I was queuing in the IVR, the customer service director voice said, send me an email and I'll deal with it. And the experience wasn't good, if I'm honest. And so I haven't moved. I've stayed where I am because it was easier. It's not cheaper, but it's easier. So that's just sort of an example. I think we should think of it in two sectors, and utility should not be sat here thinking that it's all our fault and we're not as good as anybody else. I don't think that's true. I think the willingness is definitely there. I think the point on regulator and investment is a problem, especially in water, because of the AMP process and the fact that the regulator should be saying, you know what, you need to move to the cloud. I know there's water companies sat there with a very expensive cost base that could reduce cost by moving to the cloud and could enable a lot of what Nikki has talked about.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll come back to the regulation side and investment a little bit further on, and some really interesting points there, Tim. Rick, can I bring you in to hear your sort of opening gambit?
Yeah, I just want to, I suppose, pick up on a couple of things that the guys have been saying there. I mean, I think, Nikki said like 10 years of change in one year. I mean, digital transformation and cloud transformation have been topics for a long time. And I think the word transformation is kind of, in many ways, kind of scares people because it sounds like a big deal. But actually, what we saw from a Genesis perspective over the past year, and through our cloud, we saw a 5-fold increase in the amount of digital traffic going through, and the number of people turning on digital channels. But even more, I suppose, more impressive is the number of organizations that moved their entire customer service organization to the cloud, in many cases over the course of a weekend. And that's moving hundreds of people that are in customer facing frontline roles, engaging with customers, moving them all over to the cloud, and just to keep customer experience, customer service going through that time. Now, that did have maybe a couple of negative side effects, in the sense that innovation and maybe even personalization to an extent maybe took a little bit of a back step over the last year, because the focus is really, we need to keep business going. But what it's really done for organizations is it's realized that this shift to digital and cloud actually wasn't as scary as we thought it was. No. And that's what's happened. We've now moved there. Yeah. And there's one client that I'm working with at the minute, and they're in the insurance sector, so it's outside utilities, but I just think it's a good example. They took years to convince their business stakeholders that they needed to move to the cloud, and because so many of their business stakeholders have been burned by big transformation projects in the past, and when they got there, they did it through last year, and it's like, well, what were we worried about? And now they're really focusing on innovation and focusing on now moving beyond the kind of the core technology into how they deliver value to the customers. How do they personalize? And how do they really innovate to be able to take their brand above and beyond their competition? So I think there's a great opportunity now for everybody in the customer experience arena now to really build on what we've done over the past year, and really be able to take our customer experience forward.
Thank you very much, Rick. I think you wanted to come back, Nikki, with a point about speed, really. I mean, we have seen really rapid change, and utilities and all businesses responding, as I said, at lightning speed to adapt to the pandemic. So there is a capability there to react quickly, isn't there?
Yeah, I think Rick's point is spot on. There was massive change over a weekend, and you can see in there the kind of transformation project that would we build at least 18 months to get some of those things done in the past. So I think developing the ability to be a little more willing to try stuff faster is important. I think there's something perhaps unique in the mindset around utilities and other monopoly organizations, which is, a lot of our clients were having to make really big changes really fast because they were under commercial threat. They couldn't see, if this carried on for beyond 12 months, where their business would be, if their business would exist. Travel is the perfect example. And I think there is, I don't like to use the word complacency because, you know, we know utilities are incredibly attentive to customers, but there is that certainty in a utility that we're going to be here forever. We're going to be here for years and years and years. And so they're not under the same kind of pressure. And I think that pressure develops a lot of drive and innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the retailers don't have that certainty, but
absolutely
there are others that do. Thank you for that. I know that you touched upon it earlier, Tim, about, you know, the constraints of investment and the constraints that they have with regulation. Do you think that the sort of landscape that utilities operate in does provide, you know, is quite a barrier to innovation and working at speed? I mean, let me start with you, Nikki, come back to you, Tim, and then Rig. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it can be. I think it's really hard. And to give you an example, we're working with one of the electricity distribution networks at the moment to develop a crowd service model where very much like gift-gaff, customers serve other customers. However, one of the big challenges from the directors are whatever it is you do and whatever it is you try, you mustn't impact CSAT. And that's really difficult because I don't have an opportunity to experiment in a safe place. What I really need to be able to do with the regulator is say, this is something we want to try because we think this could really advance customer experience, but I can't cost the organisation penalties in the process of doing that piece of experimentation. So I need to take a small group of customers away to do it. And I think the regulators could do a lot to encourage innovation. And I think the focus around innovative investment is on infrastructure and big capital projects and not on customer experience. And if we're really honest, in all businesses across all sectors now, the change that we're seeing is around customer experience. That's where the innovative investment needs to be.
Okay, thank you. Your thoughts, Tim, on that? I mean,
I think several points are probably on it, and I did touch on it earlier in the fact certainly from utilities they take investment on AMPs and get it signed off. And I think back to Nikki's point, if the regulator was saying, actually, we want you to invest in innovation, if the regulator understood what enabled that innovation, they would probably move really quickly. Because what we have found, especially COVID was such a perfect example, is that the organizations that had moved to the cloud before COVID just continued, and their platforms actually were more utilized. It was just simply the stories I had from CIOs saying, all we did was log off, send everyone home, and then log back on again. And it really was that simple. And if they were innovative enough, they had their PCI in the cloud along with it, and so it didn't matter. The card data and a lot of the personal GDPR data is not going to the agent sat at home in an insecure environment, and so that they really benefited from that. But the other thing we found, in utilities, a utility that had moved to the cloud was then in peak billing, because they had obviously agent issues to a certain degree with the quantity of staff. They were feeding innovation in on an agile way because they had a cloud platform, and they can say, right, peak billing, we're going to offer them messaging platforms, and then what they can do is analyze that and say who took it up, who didn't take it up, and use algorithms and AI to say, no, we won't offer it to them, we will offer it to them. And you start to feed in the innovation. They can do that because they're on a cloud platform. And the thing is, as well, is that when you move to the cloud platform, you're no longer reliant on IT. The technology that organizations have in their data centers is IT heavy. It's the nature of it. When you move to the cloud, the systems you have are managed by the business. They've got to be managed by that because they're business tools. The technology is all in the cloud, and there's friendly faces, friendly UIs there for you to be able to do stuff with. It's fundamentally different, and I think it's hard to actually get the message across. And I think the regulator probably is the answer, to be honest with you. Educate the regulator, and everything else will flow. But the key thing is, I have known that there are utilities that have got so much cost in their cost model at the moment actually move to the cloud would actually save them money. But I just, you know, have they got the manpower to do that assessment? Do they have this? Yeah. Do they have the skill? Sorry.
Thank you, Tim. No, that's great. Thank you. I think that's a really good point there. Rick, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I'd like to pile on to particularly one thing that Nikki mentioned there, and that's kind of like infrastructure is still one of the top investment priorities, and I just think that's such a shame. And it's a shame that we've kind of ended up there, because almost a consequence of digital over the years is that companies have kind of, their tech stack has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown, and you've got one bit of technology over there that's doing your emails, one technology over there that's doing social media, one technology there that's doing call center, and so on and so on. And your infrastructure has become so diverse and proliferated, and that's why there's such an focus in on integration and bringing that back all together again. And to Nikki's point, that when we're focusing on that and kind of the under bringing together diverse technologies, we're not focusing on personalisation. And so one of the big things that we're definitely starting to see people recognize is that you need to consolidate all those channels, all those areas that your customers are engaging with you on into one place. The cloud allows us to do that. Sometimes you sacrifice a little bit of specialization in one area, but for the greater good, because you end up then being able to deliver a better overall customer experience by bringing that together. And second part of that to me is the recognition that customer experience is a real-time thing. There's so much focus on data and analytics that lets you look back at what happened and what experiences and journeys that your customers went on, and where you failed them, rather than being able to actually use technology to recognize what your customers are doing right now, what they're going through, what they need, and then acting on it right now when the moment matters.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, I think we've had a question about those sort of issues, and I'll pick that up, I think, at the end. But I think utilities are, quite challenged, aren't they? That water companies, they have pressure to reduce billing costs, and it is sometimes, as you say, having to sort of invest to save, and that can be a pretty difficult sort of decision to make, I imagine. So, and great that can give examples of where it is sort of saving money. We talked a bit about sort of barriers and the issues with investment, but as everyone said, we have seen a lot of change in the past year, with a notable switch to digitalisation, and we know that there's plenty of good work going on. So it'd be really great to hear from you all on what do you think good looks like, and who is doing well. Perhaps we can start with you, Nikki, to see who's impressing you at the moment and what good looks like.
I think it's hard to single out people who've been impressing over the last 12 months, because it's been difficult, fairly chaotic. I think we're all just chilling out from that. I think we've got some clients who are really stopping and thinking, do we actually know what our customers want anymore? And are all of the things that we knew in the past now invalid? And I think it's fair to say that a number of them are very different from what we thought they are. So a real recognition that we need to go out to customers and re-understand what it is that they want from us and how they want us to deliver those services. A great example is I have broadband issues this week. I still have broadband issues this week. The priority of broadband in the household has taken a whole new level. Particularly when we're all working from home. So BT saying to me they're going to be out in 3 days to fix it is just an unacceptable service level now. Whereas a few months ago, that was probably fine. I'd have managed, I'd have gone to Starbucks to work if I needed to, if I couldn't be at the office or whatever else. That just isn't an option anymore. So, I think we've got to rethink from a customer's perspective, what's become important and more important. And we've got to reevaluate that. I think if I were to pick an example, I'm going to pick an old example, is that actually predates COVID, of where I saw a utility really tapping into understanding customers' behaviour. And that was a marketing campaign actually done by Yorkshire Water around about the time when they were anticipating having to use hosepipe bans, etc., to restrict water usage because they were looking towards a drought in the summer. And instead of going out with the usual water company messages, which are don't use your hosepipe or we're going to fine you, and don't do this or this is the consequence, they went out with a series of messages that were digital text messages and emails, which were much more light-hearted and around getting customers on side with the right behaviours. So, you know, what little thing can you do that can help us save water so none of us have to have a hosepipe ban? And these are the little ideas that you could do. Different customers will have picked up on different ideas. And I think for me, that was a nice way to spin a message and use customers to support you. I think what we've seen through the pandemic is when customers know what it is that needs to be done, you know, particularly British people, we get on and do it. We all club together and wartime spirit, let's make it happen. So I think, you know, trusting customers to come along with you rather than being more threatening, I guess, in terms of what the consequence will be, is a powerful way to work with customers.
That's a very strong message, and I think something that people really can take on board. Tim, your thoughts, please.
I'm going to pick somebody from another sector just to give some perspective, and that's actually Morrison's, who had already put a bit of AI in at the front end, and he used it as assisted service, not full service. It was identifying postcodes and routing based on those, and so had enabled cloud. And when it came to COVID, within hours, we'd set up for them a change, and in addition to that, so they could people could order food boxes. And I do remember the chief exec going on TV talking about how proud he was of this. He didn't mention us, but never mind, we'll get over that.
You'll get your rewards in heaven, yeah.
But that one was innovation. You know, innovation was there. It's assisted service. It's using AI. It was helping vulnerable people as well. They also this went on with different apps were built for vulnerable people and things like identifying vulnerable people, things like that. It really was a good case study, I think, and it was all enabled by the fact they'd gone to the cloud first. As simple as that.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. I know we're going to come on and talk about AI in a moment, but before that, any sort of what good looks like and who's
maybe my example might transition us into talking about AI, because I want to use an example of a utility that we worked with on a recent pilot, specifically with their digital sales team, their online sales team, and they were using. And by the way, I realize in a webinar about personalization, we haven't really emphasized personalization, but it's kind of in the red thread all the way through everything we're saying. And this is exactly the same for these guys. Is that they used AI to really understand and see what their prospects were doing on the website, and those prospects that really looked like they were getting close to that kind of moment of conversion, but weren't quite getting there. They needed a little bit of nudge across the line. The AI fired that real-time engagement with a sales team member to engage them, and that was personalization ultimately is about delivering the right engagement for the right customer at the right time in the right way, and being able to do that and use the AI to better prioritize and personalize. They saw a 58% improvement in online sales conversions through that time. But one of the verbatims from one of the sales agents that they gave us out of the pilot was, whenever they were engaging with a particular prospect who was asking some innocuous questions through the online chat about opening hours and things like that, the sales agent was able to see that actually their journey that had taken them to that point showed that they were comparing competitors, and they were on the comparator section of the website. So that allowed the sales agent then to have a bit much more personalized interaction and steer the customer and give answers that the customer didn't even know that they needed to how their product was better than the competition. And that was part of the reason why they were able to deliver such impressive sales results.
And is that something utility could translate to utility sector pretty easily?
Well, so that was actually a utility example, and absolutely, and maybe we start to talk a little bit about AI, but it really we've been talking a lot here about the number of interactions and the volume of interactions, the complexity of journeys. It's just not humanly possible to be able to spot the right moments, and that's really one of the areas that AI can really help us with, and being able to in real time listen to all those events. And this is why having all your customer engagement channels in one place is so important, because when you do that, the AI is able to really easily see the events that are happening, and then make those determinations in real time that says, like, there's a moment happening for this customer right now. Let's engage, and let's make that moment count for that customer.
Yeah. Oh, well, and do you think AI is going to have a big impact on, customer experience and personalisation?
I absolutely do, and I think very quickly we've learned with AI that it's not about automating and removing removing humans from the equation. It's about augmenting that experience and doing the things that are kind of hard to do at scale for humans. So AI for finding that needle in a haystack, that customer that needs to be engaged, is one use of AI that we're seeing a lot of our customers. And if I was to use an out of industry example, like Vodafone in Australia, in their digital customer service organization, they're able to use AI to predict when customers were getting frustrated with their online, trying to find an answer, and we're going to call the call center. And we all know that's a bad experience when you have to channel hop. So they used AI to predict that whenever that was at a risk of happening, and then the AI took action and got an employee engaged to have a conversation with that customer. So we're definitely starting to learn how AI can augment that experience and automate some of the kind of the transactional, easy to answer bits of the customer experience, but also do that for the agent as well, and be able to listen to conversations as they're happening, either on chat or phone call, and suggest answers to the employee in the business so that they can better serve the customer. So I think it's going to make a big impact.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to? I know you're our technology expert there, Rick, but I wonder if any, Tim or Nikki wanted to say anything on this sort of area, really, sort of other technologies that they, see having a big impact on customer experience.
It's interesting, actually. I could answer that and try and tackle a couple of the questions that have come in at the same time. Lloyd's asked a slightly loaded question on chatbots, and Anand is asking about capex to opex issue within WhatsApp, which is huge issue. How do you go from a capex environment to an opex environment? We need to tackle that probably later. But the on the chatbot, I'm not a fan of chatbots. IVAs, I think, interactive virtual assistants, and that's effectively what Morrison's were doing. And the IVA, if done properly and linked to customer service, can reduce some operating costs and provide a personalized service if it's done properly by the business. So the business understands what the process the customer is going through. And we did have a water utility that's just tried this linking this together, a first phase, and it worked quite well in peak billing, took out 10% of their calls and brought them onto messaging. So 10% of those callers would have been a lot happier to being resolved quicker than sitting in a queue. And so you go on with different phases with this, and that can reduce your operating cost, which can offset some of your new operating costs from the fact that you've moved to a cloud solution, which increases your OPEX. Anyway, that was a quick thought.
No, it was really interesting thought. I mean, it's interesting you say you're not a fan of chatbots. I don't know if you want to expand on that or park it there.
Because people, different walks, just stick it on there, and you get this thing jumping up. Especially if you're on a mobile phone, it's so irritating.
Yeah.
It's not personalised. It doesn't know. It's probably not learning who I am. Maybe it's someone I used to have it on my golf club. It used to come up all the time. Like my front page of my golf club. Why don't I want a chatbot with my golf club? Then there's going to be somebody at the other end actually answering the question. But once I wanted to order a part, for a water filter, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And somebody came on their website, but it was the person behind it very quickly. It went from a chatbot to a person. It was an IVA, interactive virtual assistant.
Right.
And that was the difference. It was an assistant. It was helping the flow into the call center. That's all it was doing. It wasn't, and it was a person that gave me the answer.
And I think it's the assistant part of that, I think, is such a crucial point, because a big part of automation, when we automate anything, it's usually about saving money for the company. It's not about assisting the customer. And when you make that shift and you think about it as assisting the customer, it's a big shift. And just to answer the second part of Lloyd's question about why are more people not using live chat today? I think a big part of the reason is when you stick a chat button in your website, everybody's going to start using it. And all of a sudden you're going to flood yourself with a lot of low value interactions. And that's why I was emphasizing a little bit earlier on how AI can help target chat to the people who actually need it. And so that example that I used earlier, for example, with the utility that was using the sales team, it wasn't just an open chat that was available to anybody that would just fancy the chat. It was only offered to those prospects that the AI determined needed help to get over the line. And I think that's a big difference in how AI can help more companies take advantage of live chat.
Okay, time is ticking on, so I won't come to you on the tech stuff if that's okay, Nikki, but just to wrap up before we talk about go back with some questions, just like to get your key takeaways. Really, we're going to have people in the audience who perhaps starting out on the journey to sort of personalisation. What would be your key bits of advice for improving customer engagement and personalising services? Really, perhaps I could start with you, Nikki.
Okay, so I think the first thing we've all got to do is go back and talk to customers about where they are at now, and I think that is very different to where they were before. So I think that's an important step because they're in a different place. And I think if we design based on what we think we know now, we're going to waste an awful lot of money. I think we also need to be talking to customers about how they are interacting with other organisations. Customers tend to have a lower expectation of what kind of interactions they can have with utilities. Utilities are using live chat. There are some utilities, Lloyd's, who are using chatbots. There are utilities using all sorts of clever technology, but it's not expected that will be there. When customers interact with retail organisations, there's an expectation that it'll be there. We have it with our local authorities too. Customers just don't expect they're going to be able to have that kind of interaction. I think we've got to be really honest with ourselves. And you know what? In utilities, we have a lot of long-serving staff. And long-serving staff does lead to, I've lived in this same bubble for a long time. I think this way, I'm conditioned to think this way. I can't see much different. So, as well as bringing in a bit of fresh blood to shake things up, I think we've got to take our old blood out and expose them to what's going on in other sectors. So I mentioned the cross-sector collaboration before is so powerful to bring some of that learning back to the organisation with experienced eyes, so with existing people. I think we've got to be a bit bolder and be prepared to test and learn. So I would say smaller projects, because the projects get too big, they get too involved, they get too expensive, they don't happen, they don't finish. So smaller test and learn projects with the acceptance that some of them will fail. And I think we find that hard in utilities. We want to measure the outcome of every project and we want it to be a success. And the reality is, if you're doing proper experimentation, some things fail. And the openness to learn from those experiments that actually what you thought was going to be the outcome isn't. And I think that's really hard when you've been in the business 25 years to go, do you know what? I really didn't expect that was going to happen. I didn't think that's what customers were going to say. What I see is a lot of justification of, they say that because, that's that just particular customer or particular group of customers. And I think we've got to challenge the risks around, if I do experiment, is it going to impact my incentives and penalties from a regulatory point of view, and is that fair?
Thank you. Some really great takeaways there. Tim, your turn.
Actually, it's one thing we've not actually mentioned, but hopefully it's a thread throughout everything, is actually, I think you've got to put yourself in your customer's shoes. That's the first thing. I think I have used the thread of move to the cloud, and then provide the business tools and support around those tools to actually change processes. So you can't combine those two together. I think you've got a powerful way forward, that you can go forward in an agile way, which is what Nikki touched on. You can't do big projects, big bang projects. You just need to enable the business with tools that they can change the way they interact with their customers. They can measure it, they can do A/B testing. But more importantly, they've started off by looking at being their own customer, eating their own dog food, is a phrase we used to use many years ago.
Okay, thank you. Rick, finally for you.
Yeah, I think for me, imperatives, bring your channels together. Bring them together to one place. Handle them with the same rules, consistency. The same processes across a lot. And one of the really cool things about AI is that it can start to learn before it starts to do anything. And we would call it observation mode with predictive engagement, but you put allow the AI to start to learn where those opportunities or where those needles in the haystack really need to be. Those moments that count, those moments that matter for your customers, where engagement is required. So allow the AI to start to learn first before you really start to put it to work in doing stuff.
Thank you so much. We have got time for a few questions. Should we kick off with? Perhaps we'll go with Rupal Patel, who's asking, given the net zero carbon agenda and everyone playing their part, is there an expectation from customers that they want more from their utility providers? So is that something you might want to sort of pick up on, Nikki?
Yeah, I think more is an interesting question. I would argue, I think what a lot of customers want from utilities is now different. And the point that he's made around electric vehicles, etc., the way we value the electricity companies in our lives will change significantly when we all start driving electric vehicles, because permanent mobility is a really important thing for customers. So I think, we're already seeing a shift around, I can't afford a power cut because my home has become my workplace, etc., etc. And electricity has certainly become more important to people. When it then is running my car as well, then we're in serious dependence zone, and you've become absolutely crucial in life. So I think it does change expectations, but I think we've got an opportunity in utilities to capitalise on this independence that customers have developed through the pandemic, which is they are prepared to be more self-sufficient, they are prepared to do things for themselves. So let's give them those opportunities before they lose those skills.
Okay. I won't. Oh, sorry, Tim. Did you want to say?
Then I've got a specific point on that, because that is my case. I wanted to move electricity company because I've got an electric vehicle. I moved into a new house. I've got a very high electricity bill. I want to know where it's going, and the smart meter is not that smart. And I wanted to move to an electricity company that could give me that. And there are some imaginative tariffs out there, but when you've got to put 16 square meters of solar panels on your roof to do it isn't necessarily the right way forward, isn't for me. And so actually I found it impossible to actually find somebody who could advise me on how I could actually identify what my spend is, because the technology doesn't appear to be there.
Well, maybe there's someone listening in who might be able to come back to you on that, because I know a few people are moving into that area. I'd like to get through a few more questions before our time is up. Going back to Anand Rakesh, who asked about how do we work around OPEX challenges when moving from on-premise to cloud. Do either Rick or Tim want to come in on that?
I think I'll come in on that one, because it is a topic we get involved in at times, and it's really difficult. And the person asking the question, I think, is a water company, I believe, and it's difficult because you're given certain OPEX and CAPEX targets, and to me, it drives the wrong behavior. It's a regulator thing. It's difficult. And some organizations are sat there with a very expensive project-based technology. Back to Nikki's point about these projects never get completed because they're difficult projects, but they're treated as CAPEX, and the treatment is difficult. For that, OPEX, the value of OPEX based cloud solutions is they do drive down your cost, so they do drive down your OPEX cost. So that is the way forward, but we could move a lot way forward if CAPEX was treated differently. And there are a lot. Also, when you look at, you've got a CAPEX base, what is the cost of the OPEX around that CAPEX base? That's a question I would ask back to the utility, is what is the cost of keeping that CAPEX base based in your people and support contracts, etc.
Okay, well, that's a very good answer. Moving on to, hope that's help there, Anand. Moving on to Donna now, who's asking, how do we envisage AI helping customers who require extra care, so such as those who are visually impaired or have cognitive issues? I think this is a question for you, Rick, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, I'll certainly take a first stab at that and talk about one of the areas that I think that Genesis is working that may help. And actually, our partnership with Google Contact Center AI allows us to do something we call agent assist, where if there's a phone call, the Google Contact Center AI is able to consistently analyze the content of that phone call, what's going on, and be recommending answers and suggestions to help the agent as they're helping the customer. So I think that's one of the ways where, perhaps those customers that are visually impaired and they have to rely on voice and phone calls and things like that, AI can still help deliver better answers. And the big benefit there is that AI is learning from the other answers that it's getting from digital channels and other channels. So those customers are able to benefit from all that expertise that's been learned along the way as well.
And is that something that's being rolled out now, Rick, or is that something for the future? Or
no, it's we've got customers that are in early stages of putting that to work now, and we've also got customers that are doing similar with Genesis native technology on chat as well, for example. But that agent assist is being rolled out now with some customers. Great,
well, that's a really exciting development. I think this is probably a question for you, Nikki, but others feel free to join in. John Bottomley is asking, with so many measures on customer experience, and he's named a few here, NPS, customer effort, CSAT, etc. Where do you see the most impactful, which are the most impactful, and which might have the most longevity? It must be, it's quite a nightmare of knowing which one to measure yourself against, I think.
Okay. Before I answer John's question, can I just add something to Donna's question?
Oh yes, okay.
I think Donna was thinking about vulnerability specifically, which is a topic really dear to my heart. And I think we often make the assumption that around our vulnerable customers, digital's not such a great idea, and we talk a lot about digital exclusion. Springs to mind a project we did with Royalton Alliance Motability. So every single one of their customers has a disability of some description, hence they are a customer. And what has been noted over the last few years is actually there's a shift from physical disability to cognitive disability. And we were encouraging them to do more digitally, do more on social, introduce live chat, and they were really fixated on phone, email, letter. This is what those customers can deal with. They can't do this. Anyway, they agreed to a pilot. We made the switch. And what was interesting was different types of ability could cope with different types of channel. And provided we gave a wide selection of channels, most customers could find a channel that worked for them. I think we often forget that telephone is one of the hardest things for these customers to use because it requires an instant response, particularly with a cognitive disability. So things like Facebook Messenger, where customers have got time to think, often work better. So Donna, if you want to pick up with me separately, I'm mad passionate about making customer experiences inclusive for all customers, particularly vulnerable customers. So that's a really interesting question for me. To answer the question from John about different measures of customer satisfaction, yes, there's quite a few. Personally, my favoured and my most valued measures are the public review site kind of measures. So Trustpilot, etc., where stuff is in the public domain and it's coming directly from customers. I think that's really powerful. I think that really tells a story. I think getting the internal stuff is useful, but I think having the boldness to allow customers to review you on Trustpilot. So if, for example, Whisperers, we are exclusively reviewed on Trustpilot. And that means we have to stand by everything we say we're going to do. Otherwise, we will be publicly named and shamed for not. And I think that changes a culture within an organisation. I think if you're only doing CSAT and you're only seeing it yourself, then there is a tendency to, things happen and they don't have the same sense of urgency. If it's out there in the public domain, it gets some attention. So I think that's important. I actually think as a temporary measure, customer effort score has become more important because I think customers are finding stuff hard right now. So I would argue that that's a really important one. But I like the, hanging our laundry in public. I think that really does focus the mind.
Okay, well, that's a pretty bold statement there, Nikki. I don't know whether Tim or Rick, you want a final word on that, or I might think Nikki said it all.
My final word on it, Nikki's the expert.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't argue with that. So I know there's lots more we could talk about. It's a fascinating subject, but I'm afraid that we have run out of time. I think we've heard some great examples, got some great takeaways. Test and learn, put yourself in customers' shoes, bring channels together, and be bold. That's a great sort of finishing line, I think, there from you, Nikki. Just like to thank all of our speakers, Nikki, Tim and Rick, to thank to Genesis and Connect, and thank you all for watching. Just to remind you, the webinar is available to stream, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on May the 5th. So thank you so much, and again, thank you, Tim, Rick and Nikki. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.